Welcome to the Background Noise Podcast. I'm your host, Jack,
I'm Joe.
And I'm Joseph.
and this week we are discussing Disney Plus's newest Marvel miniseries, Moon Knight. And before we dive deep into that and go over the characters, plot, and all that, Joe, you want to give us a plot summary?
I will do my best. All right. Do we want to do this in like sequentially, or do we want to do it chronologically?
Whatever's easier for you.
Okay, so we start off with the character
Wait,
Stephen Grant.
wait.
Yes.
Spoilers. Okay, that's it.
I don't even know if this is a spoiler because I don't even know what happened in this show.
Well, yeah, there's that.
We start off with the character Stephen Grant, who's just this mild-mannered museum employee, works in the gift shop at a museum, seems to have an interest in Egyptian history, Egyptian mythology, things like that, but it's the only thing that's weird about him is the fact that he keeps sleepwalking and finding himself in weird parts of town without explanation. Except we find out that actually he's not sleepwalking. He actually has an alternate personality in his head, and this alternate personality is a renowned mercenary who used to work in the U.S. Marines and also somehow made a deal with one of the Egyptian deities in order to get power in return for serving the deity as a force of justice. Like basically Batman if Batman was employed by an Egyptian god. So he throughout the first few episodes, Stephen is piecing together that fact, like the fact that is going on, that's been going on in the background. And also he's embroiled in this plot where there is a dead Egyptian deity that the followers of her want to bring her back so she can judge the world. And somehow Stephen has a piece that is necessary to find her because mercenary version of him stole that thing. And he's got this piece and he's trying to decide if he's going to give it back or not. It ends up getting taken, and then they get whisked away to Egypt, where they kind of are forced to work together. The two personalities in his head are forced to work together in order to save the day, essentially. In the process, he also meets the wife of his alternate personality, although they're about to get a divorce, probably because of reasons related to what's going on in the show. But they start dealing with that relationship as well. They continue to get more and more ridiculous situations, a lot of which are exasperated by the fact that the person who knows how to solve the problem that they're in is not the person who's currently in control of the body. So when they need to solve all the puzzles, it's the mercenary who's in charge, who doesn't know how to solve puzzles, when the museum guy, Stephen, would have been able to. Alternatively, when they get into a fight, it's Stephen who's in charge, when the mercenary is the one who needs to be in charge so he can fight. It's very, very funny to see them in life or death situations that could otherwise be very easily handled. But in this process of trying to stop the bad guys, Steven / Mark Spector is the alternate personality name. They get shot, they're dying, and then they discover that actually Mark is the person who is real, and Mark created Steven as basically a coping mechanism to deal with the fact that he had abusive family life because he accidentally got his brother killed as a child. Just things that happen.
Sure.
And so he created the personality of Stephen as a way of coping with things, and they've been living a dual life ever since, because that's how that works apparently. And now they have to figure out, they go through this like montage of things, like a theater of the mind kind of thing, processing their life story, and eventually they agree to work together. They go in the final battle. They have a big Marvel punch up with the guy who's the primary representative of the evil deity, who's been brought back to life at this point, obviously, because you have to have a third act where the big final boss is still alive. And then she's also fighting with the god who's the representative for Moon Knight, the Moon Knight character. And eventually they end up trapping her inside of a mortal host, and in the end credit scene, killing said mortal host. I think
after they made a big stink about, if you want him dead, you do it yourself. It's like, all right,
I will. I think that's all of the major plot elements. The majority of the story is told in this very like scattered manner.
Yes.
It's intentionally
Mhm.
told in a scattered manner where you're certain episodes you are only following Steven and you only see what Steven sees. And so when Mark is doing things, you don't see what's happening. You don't know what's going on and why Steven is ending up in situations or how he's getting out of situations. And also you have other episodes that are from Mark's perspective where you only see what Mark sees. And when Steven takes over, you don't see what's going on.
Right.
And it's intentionally in this very not destructure, but it's intentionally in this like scattershot sort of way to make you as confused as the main character.
Right. Yep, and for the most part, I'd say it works. I mean, it's kind of funny for a show called Moon Knight. Moon Knight isn't even one of the most interesting parts of the story.
Nope.
I mean, we like watching him fight and all that, but the core of the show is the relationship between Mark and Steven and their psyche, basically.
Yeah. I think Joseph and I were talking about this before the episode where we were saying the episode where he is dying, or I guess he's technically dead. The episode where he's dead and he's in the psych ward trying to piece himself back together.
Yep, Asylum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that episode is probably the most interesting episode of the show. And that should have been, there should have been more of that. And that should have been the main focus of things.
Yep, it's 6 episodes. 3 should have been the setup, and 3 should have been him in his own mind, sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I definitely. While I would have liked more, I feel like for one episode, they did a decent job covering his psyche to where we understand him much better than we did before.
Sure, certainly. I mean, if they hadn't had that episode, it would have been really rough.
Right.
But with it, I mean, that's the part that I enjoyed the most, because here's the problem. The problem is the standard Marvel problem, which is, they do excellent fight choreography and they have excellent CGI effects of monsters punching each other, or in this case, it's like floating Egyptian gods with animal heads punching each other.
Yeah,
they do an excellent job. Basically kaiju. That's actually fairly accurate. Like, they do an excellent job of that, but that's not stuff that makes this show interesting and sets it apart and makes it something you would actually want to watch. It's like it's actually the same problem that I had at the end of WandaVision. Like, all of the stuff leading up to it was really weird and interesting, and you're super invested in trying to figure out what's happening. And then the last episode, that's just a big generic Marvel punch-up magic battle. It's like, okay, we've seen generic Marvel punch-up magic battles where we have 2 people with the same power set beating each other up. We know how this ends. We already know how this ends.
Right.
And it's exactly how what happens in Moon Knight. It ends with a little bit of twistiness, but
yeah, and I think that twistiness is really what makes it stand out, because instead of us getting, I mean, we get them to fight a little bit, but the actual showdown of the villain Harrow being taken out, we don't see. We know Lockley takes over, and then he's holding Harrow by like the neck or whatever, and then he ends up giving him the Khonshu, and Khonshu finally releases them. So it is kind of cool that they skip over that, because usually we do get to see the whole thing happen. It's this epic thing. And while there is some of that there, the actual final confrontation that the two have is just skipped over because we know Moon Knight's going to win.
Yeah, I will give the movie. I keep calling it a movie. I will give the show credit for that for skipping over things that are a foregone conclusion there.
Yeah.
That little slip there actually brings up kind of another little tangent. It's like, once again, special effects are good. This is, again, movie level production value and movie level performances too. I know we'll probably get into stuff like that later, but just our protagonists and our antagonists, Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke, very, very good.
Yeah, well, we could just jump right in there. Oscar Isaac. I feel like most people probably first saw Oscar Isaac as Poe in the new Star Wars sequels, which is unfortunate because he's done so many better things than that, and this is just a great example. His role as both Mark and Steven.
What was that? The greatest. It's like he's in Star Wars. It's the greatest moment of his career. He's not doing anything. What's he doing? Why aren't they giving him anything? All right, okay, all right, fine. Is this Disney's apology to Oscar Isaac?
It better be. But yeah, he was just phenomenal in the role, and one of the best roles we've seen in the MCU, or one of the most it stands out very well. I mean, we've gotten good roles here and there, plenty of good standout roles, but this one was the best I feel like we've gotten in a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And,
again. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
Oh yeah, it's just like, it's always almost the joke. It's like, oh yeah, I'm such a good actor. I can play a split personality person or something. It's like, it's like, oh man, only such and such can do that. But really, it's just a testament to him, the fact that he was able to pull off two distinct enough people that, it makes sense. Even, and of course it helps that they're referred to as separate people even by pretty much everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a testament to his ability there.
Right. I mean, I haven't seen somebody do a split personality performance like this since James McAvoy in Split.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that was just playing. Here are a couple of archetypal character, like little archetypes that you see for short periods of time, and they keep switching out. This was two people that felt like they were people.
Yeah, both personalities were very much fleshed out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to something like Split. So thought that was very cool. And you, Joseph, already mentioned Ethan Hawke's portrayal as Harrow. I really enjoyed Harrow as a villain because he's a character who fully believes in what he's fighting for. You can tell just how hurt he was by Khonshu. Because despite Harrow being the antagonist of this, Khonshu's not really a good guy either. We'll get into that more. But
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and so, I mean, he's not one of those people who's doing it for greed, power, anything like that. He's somebody who fully believes what he's fighting for, which just makes him that more compelling.
Mm-hmm.
And loved how, especially, I think it was the final one. They finally is the guy's name Amit? Is that right?
Yes.
Amit.
Yep. Okay. So when they finally, right, exactly. So when they finally let Amit out, loved how he was fully willing to let himself die, knowing his scales weren't balanced and all. He was fully committed. Because a lot of times they come out and, he just wants power and all that. But he was fully committed to what he was doing. And that was cool to see because it's like, okay, well, at least he's owning that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he genuinely believes in the cause, and he understands that according to his own standard of morality, his own standard, he knows that he doesn't measure up, which is a much more compelling character, right? A character who's
absolutely.
I fully 100% believe in this standard, and I know I don't measure up, and I deserve to be punished for it. Like, I don't think that the standard that he upholds is a good one. I don't think that the cause he's fighting for is a good one. But the fact that he's 100% committed to it, like, makes it more interesting, certainly.
Yeah, exactly. He was completely committed to the cause no matter what, and that worked very well, I thought.
I thought it was funny that the minute he meets his deity, he's like, all right, yep. It's just like this big moment for him of like, I know I'm unworthy. And she's just like, whatever. I mean, maybe I'm in for something different. All right, you wanna go blow some stuff up? He's like, I mean, I guess. It's like, all right, yeah, let's go.
It's like he's more committed to her cause than she is.
Seriously.
Almost, yeah. It's almost like she's a figurehead of her own religion. Like, she's a powerful.
That's what they look like, at least.
I didn't even mean to do that. Yes, because she's just.
Anyway.
It is impressive. I mean, we take it for granted, right? We take it for granted because it's Marvel that they can do this kind of CGI stuff. But like, the animal head deities were pretty convincing. Like, they looked they were people in that world. I mean, they're also intentionally made to be somewhat larger than life, sometimes literally larger than life. And even when they're not physically dominating, they're still, obviously presented as being magical. But like, they do a really good job of it. So again, we keep taking it for granted, but also it should be said.
Yep. No, I agree. Amit and Khonshu both look great, and this show just confirms it because I already had a pretty good suspicion, but this show absolutely confirms it. Everyone looks better in a suit. Everyone. Khonshu looks better in a suit. Moon Knight looks better in a suit. Everyone looks better when you have the button-up shirt, the tie, all of it.
The gloves.
It's just that is peak outfit right there.
Impeccable drip, just impeccable.
Indeed. Impeccable drip to be hip with the kids.
Shut up. The youngest one here, I get to do it.
All right. We're gonna let that one slide and move on to other
No,
thoughts.
Joe, you're gonna let it drip.
No, stop. Oh, you're saying it wrong. Ugh, it's not cool anymore.
I ruined it, didn't I? Oh no, Joe's breaking. He's about to become another personality.
Oh, no.
We better change to
No.
His fail-safe personality is coming out.
The British side is taking over.
See, if I could do a good British accent, this is where I would do that. Unfortunately for you guys, I can't. So,
unfortunately for you, I had a happy childhood.
Yes, unfortunately.
No funny personalities here. Anyway, speaking of the good suit, they seem to pull a lot of Moon Knight's like character stuff from the comics, which is good and all, and just the fact that the Mark Spector suit. I'm trying to like differentiate because it is a little confusing when you're trying to talk about it, but the Mark Spector suit, the mummy dude, is just like comic Moon Knight, sort of kind of like this. It's a little more like a Batman suit in the comics, and I'm really glad they didn't do that because that would have looked a little funny. I know we're getting towards more comic accurate stuff, but we can leave some things behind. And then the Mr. Knight, the Stephen Grant suit is actually like from another comic run in like the 2010s or something, where he got like the Stephen Grant part completely took over and he turned into a guy named Mr. Knight, which again it's a long and complicated character history that I'm really glad they distilled it into just mercenary with one other personality until the very end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I'm really surprised they were able to pull the Mr. Knight thing off as well as they did.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. The only other character I think of that's really has a major role in this, aside from the two we mentioned, was his love interest, Layla.
Oh, yeah.
And while I wasn't sure what to think of her at first, overall, I think I liked her, and she played off Oscar Isaac very well.
Yeah, I think she did an excellent job as a secondary deuteragonist, right? I think that's the word.
That's correct.
Protagonist as a main character, deuteragonist as a secondary character.
She sure was standing there.
Yeah,
she's
talking.
I mean, she was involved in the final battle.
Mm-hmm.
No, but it was sort of like
she was the Scarab, Joseph.
What? I don't know who that is, and I don't care.
Is that a character?
Is it?
Well, apparently, from the research that I did, I think there was an episode earlier where like she's talking to her mom. Apparently, the nickname for her when she was a kid was Scarab by her dad.
Yeah.
So she becomes the Scarab.
Guys, you don't get it. Scarlet Scarab coming 2024.
It would have been cooler if she had turned into a hippo. That's the question.
See, that's what I was thinking. When the hippo goddess lady says, like, I have a great costume for you, and her person, everything about that hippo, I can't remember that deity's name. The one who the fairy woman for the boat.
Yes.
Whatever her name is, when she said I have a great costume, I was 100% expecting it to be just a giant hippo suit.
That would have been awesome.
like
Ace Ventura, but a hippo. How do I control this thing?
No, actually, now I'm thinking of not a costume that a person wears, but like a mech suit.
Oh
that's
no!
A hippo. She's piloting
like the Rhino in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, kind of.
Oh,
except hippo mech suit.
Except like ancient Egyptian magic powered instead of super mechanical. So like it'd be gold instead of steel and everything.
It's the Moon Knight we deserved.
Probably not. I don't think anyone actually wants to see that, but I was expecting that.
They didn't really touch on it much, but there was sort of a bit of a love triangle between Layla, Steven, and Mark, which is kind of funny. And so they probably have already released it. But if not, here's another meme for you. The meme, you have Layla's walking away, the girl in the red dress, and you have the guy looking at her, and it's Steven. And then the girl looking at the guy is Mark, like all offended. Because you've seen that one, right?
No. It would need to be
Jack,
the girl is. It would need to be Layla looking at Steven while Mark is looking.
There
at
we
her.
go. That
yeah,
was...
like Mark is upset that Layla is going after the other version of him.
All right,
Fair enough.
Find this. We're going to link it in the description, guys.
Yeah, we're gonna make that meme and post it. Also, what is man? This is one of those things where, this. Obviously, for those of you who aren't aware, this is not an accurate representation of what DID, dissociative identity disorder, is actually like. First of all, because there's very little evidence that DID is actually a real disorder. But second of all, even the evidence that exists, it doesn't give you. It's not a superpower where you can just spontaneously create personalities in your head that you can have take over when you want them to.
Oh yeah, the funniest part of this thing was when he's like Steven gets left behind in the sands, which again is funny because it's like you dropped your imaginary friend and you left your imaginary friend in the sandbox and you got to go get him, and then he's like about to die and he's just like, the only real superpower I ever had was you. It's like, okay, you're telling schizophrenics something they really don't need to know,
right? Well, I actually. Technically, the only superpower he ever had was the ability to create personalities. Like that would be, I don't know if I would call it a superpower. It would definitely be an unusual ability.
Right. It only became super when Kanju, enslaved him. Before that, it was just a power.
Yeah, sure.
It's what he does. He Khonshu helps people. He takes their disabilities and makes them into abilities.
He takes their disabilities and exploits them.
What? What? No, that's just Joe. That's just it's semantics, really. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, potato, tomato.
One thing, and you may have picked up on this, Joe, because I know you're big into mythology and stuff. Mm-hmm. This probably, I could be wrong, because I know things like Thor and all that, they touch like surface level, like elementary stuff when it comes to mythology. Whereas this one, I felt like when it came to Egyptian mythology, they really tried to go pretty deep into that, and they really sort of owned that for a lot of it.
So this is actually something really interesting, because the way Egyptian mythology is structured, the religion that ancient Egypt lasted for a couple thousand years, and so saying this is what their mythology was is a little bit it's not consistent. Obviously, there's a little bit of drift, but the general idea was there are the deities that exist in some kind of metaphysical plane, but the people on Earth are acting as their avatars. That is, I don't think that people in ancient Egypt thought that acting as the avatar of Khonshu meant that you wore a funny suit and you went around murdering people. I suspect that's not what they had in mind, but they did have in mind, like, the pharaoh is explicitly an avatar of Osiris, who is the king in Egyptian mythology, right?
Yeah.
And then the son of the pharaoh is the avatar of Horus, who is the son of Osiris who takes over for him, right? So, like, that actually is exactly how Egyptian mythology works, where all of the important humans are supposed to be acting as avatars for all the important deities.
Yeah.
So that is very accurate. And then all of the deities that are named are fulfilling the roles that they're supposed to be fulfilling. Like, they talk about, there's several times when the hippo goddess, whose name I can't remember because it's something weird, she talks about Osiris being angry or upset, because Osiris is the god of the dead, right? So he would be annoyed that people are escaping from the Duat, the Duat actually is this underworld river where people go when they die, and all of that is fairly accurate to Egyptian mythology. Which is interesting that they showed you a spiritual world that is an afterlife, because I don't think that we've done that in a Marvel property before. Like, we talked
about the ancestral plane.
Oh, we have seen the ancestral plane. I'm sorry. Yes, you are correct. I forgot.
Doesn't the ancestral plane get mentioned by the hippo lady?
Yes, it does. Yes, she does. She talks about how all of the Yes. Now that you're mentioning it, I remember she talks about how all of those worlds are fairly close together.
Huh.
Yeah. we might see something like that inside the Soul Stone when Thanos does the snap. That might be inside of a afterlife world, or it might be he's hallucinating, or it might be something going on with the Soul Stone. That's speculation. But this is like we spend a lot of time in an actual afterlife that canonically exists in the Marvel universe now. So we can take that. We can interpret whatever we want from that.
One step closer to Ghost Rider and the Midnight Suns. I'm telling you, boys, it's gonna happen.
You know what? We're not going to take that away from you.
Nope.
Good. You better
Not this episode.
I'm waiting for someone with more authority to do that.
Like Kevin.
Yep.
If
You're waiting for do it. I want it to be Kevin.
The man himself has got to tell you.
That's right. I'm curious if you guys caught on to this. This was just something, again, doing my research for the episode, I realized is, so Moon Knight character, Mark, a Jew, is enslaved by Khonshu, the Egyptian god.
Oh, yes, I thought about this.
What?
Yeah, I thought about that as well. I noticed that as soon as they had the scene where he's wearing a yarmulke, and because he doesn't go to they call it, there's a specific word for the not the wake, but whatever it is in
the Jewish equivalent,
the Jewish version of awake. I can't remember.
Yeah,
he shows up, but doesn't actually go into his mom's whatever that is.
Yeah,
wake. We'll just call it awake because I can't remember the word.
Sure.
I was like, they literally did that. They literally had a person of Jewish descent, who might, whether he's practicing or not seems questionable, but
yeah,
being somewhat willingly, but also not exactly enslaved by an Egyptian deity. That's a choice. Is that comic book accurate? Is he Jewish in the comic book?
I actually wonder.
I don't know. I'm curious.
I'm looking that up.
Oh, I typed in "is Mark" and the first thing that came up is Mark Spector Jewish? So,
oh well,
he is Jewish in the original Moon Knight comics.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
And
bold move
from 1975. So we'll just leave that to someone else to talk about.
That is a suitcase that is fully loaded, and we'll let someone else unpack that.
Yes.
Anyway, let's talk about something else.
Sure.
Here's a problem that I had. Here's something that I kind of was a little bit annoyed at. The entire time I was watching this. I think maybe in the first episode they might reference like the blip or something like that. Maybe I'm not sure even if that happens. But the entirety of the show, I was waiting for the time when, I don't know, Falcon flies in, or when Doctor Strange walks across the screen because he's like, oh, I have magic and you have magic, and I got to point out the magic thing, or something. I was waiting for the MCU crossover, right?
Yep.
Something to show up that connects us back into the broader MCU, because all of the other shows have been either about established characters, or we already know how they fit into the MCU, or they have been about like fleshing out an area of the MCU that connects back into everything, where we don't know exactly what the story is, but we understand how it connects back in.
Yep.
And I would have enjoyed this show more if someone just said, here is this interesting show. It does nothing to do with the MCU. There's this really weird show that is got a weird, unique way of telling a story, and it does have kind of a superhero character, but not really the way you would think of a superhero being. And just like they said, this is something that's good and you should watch it, as opposed to it being part of the MCU and me spending the entire time wondering, okay, what is the point of this? How does this connect back to the MCU proper? How does this fit into the overarching stories? Like this isn't a problem with the show, but I was frustrated because I was expecting that, and it's like, well, I was like, okay, well, why do we care about this? What does this have to do with the overarching MCU plot?
See, it's kind of funny because for me, I feel like I actually really liked that about the show, because I love the idea that it's completely disconnected from the MCU, because it's not interested in expanding the overall story of the MCU. It just focused on telling its story. And so I feel like most shows coming up that are about new characters that have been established should do the same thing. Keep it disconnected from the MCU. If it's good, if people like it, then you can start to connect it in. But start separate, because that way, if it's bad and it stinks, like Eternals, then you can just scrap it. But instead of trying to integrate something in that just does not work, and then having to find a way to pull it out, I feel like it's a much smarter idea to do something like this, where nothing's mentioned. It's its own thing. It works very well on its own, tells a very good story. Now, since that worked, people liked it, they can maybe try to incorporate other MCU elements into it.
Sure. So that's the thing is, when like way back when you're watching Iron Man or you're watching Thor or you're like the first
Before
Phase
Avengers.
1 movies, yes, pre Avengers 1 movies, you can appreciate them as just their own character.
Yep.
And then you appreciate the little nuggets that are connecting it into the idea of a broader story.
Yeah.
But in a post-in-game world, like every other show, movie, etc., that we've seen from this universe has been openly acknowledging the fact that it is in a post-in-game world, and it all connects back in. And so it's not that it was bad that it didn't do it. It's the fact that, again, it can be a personal expectations thing.
Yeah.
Like, I was expecting something different.
Sure.
And the jarring contrast there was confusing and frustrating.
Gotcha. I feel like I wasn't, just because aside from Eternals, this is the first time we've been introduced to a character who we haven't seen already in a show. Every single other Disney Plus show we've gotten have all been of characters who were affected by Endgame or Infinity War, whatever you want to call it, the snap. Most of these shows have been either happening during Endgame or the aftermath and the effects. Whereas Moon Knight and Eternals are the same thing, even though they're both completely different as far as quality. Both of them are separate, and I think maybe even Eternals mentions something, but it has very little to do with the overall story. And so,
true.
Now, see,
Although,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Shang-Chi also has very little to do with Avengers.
It's true, but he's a new character. He's a new character who was. But yeah, that's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Let's make it its own thing. If it works, great. And now, since we like Shang-Chi, I'd love to see more of him. But keep it separate.
The difference there is that at the end, first of all, it is connected because you get the payoff for some Iron Man 3 stuff that was frustrating.
It's true. We get, you're right.
You get that payoff, and at the end, we get an end credit scene where Wong shows up and he's like, "Hey guys, you want to be not Avengers, but cool? You want to be cooler than the Avengers?" Like, I mean, that's not exactly what happens, but that's basically what happens. Like, it has the bookending connections.
Yeah.
Whereas this is just fully its own thing, and it could have just been fully its own thing.
Yep.
Now, see, I'm kind of in both boats in the sense that I enjoyed the fact that it was separate. I kind of didn't notice the fact there was no connection, but then there's the thing. It's like, all right, you're putting this in the MCU. This is a Marvel character, I understand. And, you'd have to go through a ton of stink to, I guess, oh, yeah, this is separate from the MCU. It's like, oh, why is it? Oh, it's a separate universe now. And then it's just like, whatever. Okay, just throw it in the MCU. But then it's just sort of like, they almost did it to have kind of MCU viewer base points. It's like, okay, if you're gonna watch this, if you're watching the MCU, you're gonna watch this. But then they didn't have the same thing that people who are kind of watching all these things, which is a little bit of the interconnectivity. They didn't have that, so kind of what's the point of putting it in there? However, I still also like the fact that it wasn't bogged down by, hey guys, remember the snap, or hey guys, remember when such and such happened. But then there's the same thing of it's not bogged down by that, but then there's also the near world altering stakes of like a standard MCU film. It's like, what is it? You've got two Egyptian gods duking out in the shadow of the pyramids, or they're invisible or something. I don't know. Either way, that's happening. Or then you've got this like mad terrorist essentially using magic to kill hundreds. And it's just like, okay, so Doctor Strange doesn't show up, no backup, whatever. And it's like, the same thing back when I guess what is it, Phase 2 or whatever, like the
Well, that's been an issue since
Iron
the
Man
first
3 and
Avengers
Thor:
film.
The Dark World problem, and even
Yeah.
what is it? It's still a problem. They were getting better at it, and it's like, either put it in the MCU and put a couple trappings on there without making it too obvious or too, I don't know, transparent or like pandery, which or just don't. It's like, okay, this is put out by Marvel. It's a separate show. Have fun, and then they like him. Okay, pull some multiverse stuff. He's in the MCU now. I don't know. It's strange. It really is.
All right, Mr. Doctor.
Maybe, but who are we to judge?
Yeah,
Joseph?
yeah. I do have a question, because I was actually thinking about this last week in our Multiverse of Madness episode, and we didn't have enough time to talk about it then because there was so much to talk about from the movie.
Mhm.
Talk about it now. Is the MCU too big? Is there too much going on in the MCU now? Because like here we have this little side TV show on a Disney Plus TV show that it seems like it's being well received, and so it probably will eventually connect back into the story. Let's assume that it does, but let's just assume that it doesn't. Let's assume it's its own thing. We still have not universe-ending stakes, but we still have Earth-ending stakes, right? If Amit escapes properly, she'll kill who knows how many people all over the world, and there isn't a Thanos snap to undo here. Right? They're dead.
Right.
So, this is just a little side project, right? Like, is the world too big where we got so many different world-ending calamities happening every week here? Is that what the MCU is like? There's just every week there's a guy with 10 magic rings threatening to release the evil the dweller in darkness, or there's an evil deity that's going to be resurrected and try to kill everyone, or there's a giant monster that is living in the center of the earth erupting out of the core to destroy how much, like, back in Iron Man, right? We've always had to go back to the roots. Back in Iron Man, it was one guy who was too greedy and was willing to sell weapons to terrorists, and it was going to make life difficult for people, but it wasn't literally the end of the world. And now we've gotten to the point where everything has to be the end of the world, like has to literally be threatening the end of a world, or else it doesn't matter, because the MCU is this massive thing that literally spans a multiverse now,
right?
So I don't know. It's a problem of you get desensitized almost. You get like this goes back to what I said before. Where I cared most when it was Mark Spector and Stephen Grant trying to figure out their interpersonal lives literally inside of their own head. That's what I cared about. I did not care about, oh no, the weird creepy lady with a crocodile head escaped, and now we have to go and punch her a bunch until she stops being mean. Arr.
It might have almost even been better if it was just like the conflict with Ethan Hawke was just like, okay, maybe he wasn't even going to release it. Maybe he just wanted, because maybe it would have been more interesting if he was just trying to get Khonshu trapped. Like he was just trying to get vengeance on Khonshu or something. And because it's like, that's not world ending, but to this little story, that would be a big consequence. Because then, it's like, I don't know. But yeah, it's hard to recapture lightning in a bottle. The reason, like, the third act of Avengers was such a good, like, action movie moment. The reason, what is it? They had the big 360 pan and shot of like the whole team or something. Is because it's an alien invasion. This is the biggest thing that's ever happened for these collection of movies. And then it just kept trying to up that. We got a robot invasion threatening to blow up the Earth. We got, and then Thanos came in, actually won. That shook things up. That was fun. But
I still loved Endgame.
Yes,
Endgame's battle. Come on.
Big explosion. It's like it's hard to top. It's hard to top when it was hard to top Endgame or Infinity War.
Right.
This is why I can't remember if I ever talked about things like this on the show before, but I really enjoyed Ant-Man because Ant-Man was just a heist movie, right? It
Yeah.
was
I think
just
both of them were, weren't they?
both of them were just heist movies. Yeah,
Yeah.
like there was a little bit of like, oh, they're stealing this really powerful weapon, but like it was just a heist movie. It was self-contained and it exists on the MCU,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have literally the end of the world stakes. And it was more fun and more enjoyable and more like you cared more about this what's going on with the characters because of that.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, and again, I cared about what's happening inside Mark Spector's head.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about all of this other nonsense.
Sure.
So that's I don't know. That's I'm afraid that the problem is I'm afraid that it's an unsolvable problem, and that the MCU is going to it's going to keep accelerating to nowhere. It's going to keep
It
going up.
collapses on itself.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
black hole, right? It's going to just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it collapses in on itself under its own weight.
Yeah, I mean, whatever happens, I do not see them ever topping Endgame.
No, yeah, you can't. Because even if they have a bigger threat, we won't have the same level of build up to it, right?
Right.
Caring about those characters as much as we do. Again, because of the smaller stakes, right? The
Yep.
smaller stakes where we actually care about them as people leading up to we care about the world because it's the world that the people we care about live in.
Yeah.
So
And then,
So you just-
then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so you mentioned Ant-Man. I'm really excited. Well, I want to be excited for the new Ant-Man movie because I haven't seen Ant-Man in a while. I kind of miss Ant-Man. I'm ready for some more Ant-Man.
Paul Rudd and his eternal youth.
Paul Rudd is a national treasure.
It's true. I think I pretty much covered most of it. I think there was one or two other things I wanted to add. I do think it was kind of cool that they didn't go the traditional origin route or anything like that. They just dropped us right in the middle of everything in episode 1. Just dropped us right in from Steven's perspective, trying to figure out what's going on.
Mhm.
So I thought that was fun.
It is technically an origin story from Steven's perspective.
Sure, but I mean, we're not like starting at the very beginning
No.
of Mark doing all that. We eventually get to that and figure out what happened, but just drops us right in, and I thought that worked fine.
Yes, I agree.
I did enjoy the slight mystery elements, even knowing that Moon Knight's Schizo Batman. Even then there was a decent enough like difference. And was it the person I watched it with didn't had no idea like about Moon Knight, and it's just like, oh yeah, who was the base one? Who's the first one? Is he possessed or something? And it's like, I feel like this show is really made for that first time watcher. And even someone who's familiar with Moon Knight, it's like, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's really about it.
No,
I mean, we've talked about the most important characters.
Mhm.
We can do without. Well, you know what? There is one more thing. There is one more thing that I was going to bring up. It's what is it? It's in the Mind Palace episodes or episode. Was it just one? Or
No,
did they bleed together?
They bleed together a little bit. There's a
Okay.
couple.
Yeah,
of
but
them.
the main one is Asylum. Episode
That's
5.
right, Asylum. Okay, and yeah, what is it? The funny thing is that I noticed, like, he's in the room. It's like, oh yeah, I remember all these people that Khonshu had me kill, and it's like, huh? There's like 20 people in here. You were a mercenary, Mark. You remember that part? And what is it? Yeah, you remember? What is it? I don't know. Half the people in that village or whatever. There weren't any. It didn't seem like there was any. Wait, no. Did he? What were the places he mentioned? Because he mentioned Cairo and the knife guy came up out of the Duat or whatever. But it's like, oh yeah, it's kind of low, and then that leads to another good moment. It's of like where Steven sees the like weird mental manifestation of Mark's little brother. He's like, what? Why is there a child in here? What did you do? Like that's pretty good.
Yeah. Although you'd think the number would be, I don't know if you think the number would be bigger or not, but I don't think Mark killed all those people. I feel like Jake would have been responsible for a lot of them.
Yeah, well, then where's his room? No.
Yeah, that's actually this is the actual biggest problem I have with the show. I guess we should talk about this here at the end. The biggest problem
Let's talk
is,
about Jake.
yeah, the problem is if
we need to
Mark is dying and Mark is the actual person. Mark is the actual person that exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
If he is dying, all of his personality should be on that boat. It's not like some of them are going to live when the body dies, right? So all of them should be on the boat, and so there shouldn't be a secret that they exist, unless they're
Right.
just not fully in, unless Steven is more of a person than the others because he's the oldest or something like that, and the others aren't really people, they're just like a funny character trait and absolutely no compassion.
Right.
Like then I guess that's the explanation, but that means that it's also, if that's the explanation, then it's unsatisfying when they discover that this person exists, because it's like, okay, that's not really a person, that's just a funny character trait and a weird accent and a merciless attitude. So
sure, and I totally get why they did it, but thinking about the boat and all that, and how all of his personality should have been there, I get why they did it, but you probably should have seen him sooner if they were going to play that card.
Now, I what is it? I do understand what you're doing, and he is on the boat. He was locked in another sarcophagus, but the thing is, does he have such little effect on if he has so little effect on Mark Spector as to not be the one that's making the scales go crazy, which is what Steven's doing with the fact that he doesn't realize that he's not real. Well, then does that mean Jake Lockley knows that he's not real? Well, then why is he locked up in a sarcophagus like the other personality? And why would someone who's a remorseless psychopath not affect someone's mental state? Tip the scales. It's just like, the more you think about it's like they did visually, they did someone with split person, fantasy split person, fantasy DI, essentially. They did that very well. Just the fact that you saw one of them in the reflection. Both of them are right next to each other, and of course, that was always cool in the Asylum thing. And then in the very last episode, since they're able to switch seamlessly, you see the suits transform, and that's cool and stuff. But in terms of executing it in the, I guess, not believable way, because again, fantasy DID or whatever, but they just didn't seem to stick the landing in the substance portion.
If you drill down into the fact that he has multiple personalities and accept that from the beginning, any explanation for the death scene, any explanation doesn't make any sense. Because if you explain it one way, then it has holes, and if you explain it the other way, it has holes. And the only way that it makes sense is if you say it's a TV show and it doesn't matter, but then that's unsatisfying, because you're like, okay, well then why did I watch it in the first place?
Why does anything matter then? Huh? How about that?
If the explanation is it's a TV show, it doesn't matter, then the answer to that is, why do we care at all?
Right. Yeah, it should have been either just Mark on the boat, or it should have been him and all of his personality buddies.
All of his imaginary friends.
Yes.
But then we couldn't have Steven get stuck in the sand and leave the fourth episode, fifth, on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, the fifth.
I think it's the fifth, yeah. Oh no.
Oh no.
Bummer.
Guys,
anyway.
I literally cried when Mark died. It was hashtag tearjerker. That's what Disney wants. They want someone to see that, and they're like, "Oh man, I got what is it?" And then they're going to send their bots to say that things were sad, and people are going to agree with them.
When the main title character dies halfway through the show, I was definitely concerned that was him actually dying.
We're going to follow Layla now because she's a breath.
She's been a fully fleshed out character up to this point.
She's a breath. That would be funny if Moon Knight just dies and then we actually get they actually give Layla some decent material and she goes on her own crazy adventure, and then
Wrath of the Scarab.
Yeah. It's like Moon Knight will return in episode 6. Wait.
What?
What do you mean?
The question is, what's a sadder imaginary friend death? Steven or Bing Bong?
Never seen Inside Out, but I know Bing Bong's the little elephant thing, right?
Yep.
Steven, he's British.
Yeah, British people are more important than
Wow.
imaginary
British
elephants.
people are better than elephants.
Yeah.
That's
On
so
the
sad.
scale of sympathetic imaginary people, the British top elephants. Because
British-
neither of those things are real, you know.
British museum gift shop employees.
have more value than elephants.
Yep.
Oh man, speaking of that,
Oh.
speaking of that, we did talk about the best scene in the show when was it Moon Knight and Khonshu turn back the sky? That is
Oh, that was
popping up-
good.
popping
Yeah,
up all over the
that was
internet.
all right.
And I think that's literally all we can say is that it's good because it was I mean
Stunning visuals,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Okay, that's about it. I guess.
All right. Well, I think we can probably do our ratings. You know, our out of our. I guess it's it's like 10. What do we call it? 10-star.
10
What do we call it?
moons.
I've just been saying out of 10.
Yeah,
10
out of
moons.
10 or out of 10 scale.
10 moons.
For me, I was teetering back between an 8 and a 9. I think for now I'll stick with an 8.
Fair. So here's the thing. I think that the show was very well done for the story it was trying to tell.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, I don't actually like a story where where the main character has no idea what's going on and you are confused because the main character it was done well, but that is not my preferred kind of story. So I can only give it a 7
Okay, that's fair.
because of that. Like
That's fair.
it's well done, but not the kind of story I want to tell. I want to watch. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I like the Moon Knight. He do the moon things, and he not afraid.
He's got that moon drip.
Okay.
Oh gosh, stop it.
6 out of 10.
Fair.
Alrighty then. Well, this has been Background Noise. As always, if you've been listening, we appreciate you. And if not, well, you didn't miss anything. Tune in next week where I think we are covering the Jurassic Park trilogy. Is that right?
Correct. With a special guest.
With a special guest. So
Ooh.
stay tuned for that. Until next time, see ya.
Oh no, the alternate personality, it's taking over. Go watch Morbius.